Delegation is just a tricky topic. On one hand, you've been told as a leader you should delegate more. And on the other hand, you've been conditioned by society that you got to do everything yourself. I remember when I started leading people, and honestly, it was just a mess. It's like that same tension where I've been conditioned that I'm supposed to ace the test. I'm supposed to solve things on my own, pull myself up by my own bootstraps. So it almost feels like a bad thing to hand work off to someone else. And then if you're like me, you actually do feel bad giving people work to do. I was like, I don't want to overload you. So there's that tension. And then I do try to delegate, and I'm like, it's faster and easier to do it myself. They're just going to mess it up. Okay, I'll hand it to them, and then they do mess it up. Or the work just ends up back on my plate. So I was stuck between this tension of knowing I need to delegate, but also knowing that it's not working. So I started searching for answers, and I was trying different frameworks and reading and learning, and it seemed like everything was just too complicated. It doesn't work in real life. It sounds great on paper, but it doesn't work. And that's when I realized that there's one missing piece of this puzzle. There's actually one key that solves for all of these problems with delegation, and no one's talking about it. And that one thing is what I call delegating the thinking. I don't like theories that don't work in real life, so I started trying this out myself. And not only did this approach work, but it actually kind of surprised me. I was feeling better as a leader because I was doing my real job of empowering people to do the work, but they were also feeling better because they had purpose and they had meaning in what they were doing. Then the part that surprised me is they actually came up with better solutions than I ever could myself. And then over time, as I started coaching leaders, I would share this with them, and it was working for them too. And so I realized at some point, this is an approach that really works, and it's worth sharing with you. So this whole video is really walking through what it looks like to delegate the thinking so you can free up your time and do what you're meant to do, and also empower people to love their work because they are actually solving things on their own. Here's the thing. Most approaches to delegation come in too late in the process, once you've already done the heavy lifting of thinking through what the work needs to be, how it should be done, etc. So then the problem is you've already done the bulk of the work yourself. You're still the bottleneck. But delegating the thinking comes in earlier, and it hands off the thinking work to the other person. This is the step that's a game changer for most leaders, and it has tons of benefits. But here are the two major benefits you'll start experiencing right away. One is it frees up a bunch of time for you. I mean, you'll start realizing how much time you used to spend thinking through a project or a task before handing it off. So now you have all that time to actually guide and support the people, and it multiplies your results and the impact of what you were previously trying to do all on your own. Secondly, it eliminates the risk of people messing things up, doing it wrong, running in the wrong direction without the knowledge you have. And that's because delegating the thinking, it empowers people to take real ownership of their work, while giving you the checkpoints to advise and correct and guide them along the way, versus being worried and having to be the bad cop over and over. If you've been a leader for a while, this might sound too good to be true, but I'm telling you, this approach transformed my 20 plus years of leadership from draining to exciting. And I've seen it work for hundreds of other leaders we've coached at Greenhouse, for some of the biggest companies in the world down to founders of startups and small businesses. So let's dig into how it works to delegate the thinking. It's really just one step, but you can think of it in 4 parts. Notice, ask, empower, and then check for understanding. So let's break it down one by one. First one, notice. This is the moment of truth. You probably do it all the time without even realizing. You start problem solving and ideating, and then you hand off your idea to someone else for them to work on it. But like I said before, you've already lost before you started. And that's because you're owning the work. So you're robbing them of the chance to create and feel ownership in their work. They don't feel ownership of the idea because it's actually yours, it's not theirs. And they don't fully engage their brain because you did the creative part for them. Just think about it for a second. People feel ownership all the time when they're part of creating and deciding a thing, whether it's a kid drawing a picture or building a fort, or an adult choosing a car to buy, planning a trip, cooking a meal. When the idea comes from you, you naturally care about it more. And the same is true with delegation. If you do all the thinking, then hand your idea to someone else, they're not going to take as much ownership, and they probably don't understand the work as much either. But when you let them come up with the ideas, and they come up with how to approach the task or the project, then suddenly they're way more bought in. And this is why delegating the thinking is such a game changer. It's why skipping it causes all the other delegation efforts to crumble. So you want to stop yourself from problem solving and let them think through things first. That way, when they're doing the work, they understand it better and they're bought in on how to do it. So part 2, ask. I know exactly what you're thinking at this point. If I ask them to do the thinking, they'll take it in the wrong direction or they'll come up with a bad idea. And I like the honesty. I've been there too. But here's the trick. You're not asking them to go make a plan etched in stone and just hope that they don't screw it up. No, instead, you're just asking them to do a rough draft. Whether it's jotting down a bullet point outline for a meeting, sketching out a draft project plan, or assembling a list of information, you just ask them to do the thinking and then come back to you with a rough draft. In fact, you even say something like, hey, can you just draft up some thoughts? Nothing fancy, doesn't have to be perfect. Then we'll look at it together so I can share my thoughts and give you some direction. And that way, saying something like that, they're empowered, which brings me to my third part. The beauty of asking them to do a rough draft of the thinking part of the work is A, you don't have to spend energy worrying that they won't do it right or how you would. And B, they don't procrastinate as much, having all this stress feeling like they have to nail it on the first try. All you have to do is set a time together when you'll review their thoughts. Again, these 3 parts can loop as many times as you need until you're confident about the direction of the work and they're confident in how to do it. And this isn't just for junior level people. This is a game changer even at senior executive levels. It works for everyone. Now, there's so much more I want to say here, but not enough time. That's okay. I'll get into all the objections, all the nuances, and how to do this right in the mini course. But onto part 4, check for understanding. So at this point, you're ready to end the conversation. But before you do, it's very smart to make sure you're on the same page. This is a step I learned from many failures of my own, and it prevents a lot of rework and a lot of heartache. Because at the end of a conversation, you'll both nod your heads in agreement and then later realize you actually had different expectations about this whole drafting up thoughts thing. So all you need to do is ask them a simple question. Something like, okay, before we leave, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So can you just say in your own words, what is it that you're planning to do? And that way, if there's any gap between the two of you, you'll see it and you'll be able to close that gap. Steve Ellis, the founder of Chipotle, said, when you give people more responsibility, they become more responsible. It's that simple, but it can be hard to start doing it. And that's because you're breaking the habit of thinking through solutions all the time. You're stopping yourself, and then you're handing that thinking over to someone else. This is a game changer, and you find that what makes it so transformative is that you're not just transferring the work itself to someone else, you're also transferring the feeling of ownership to someone else. Now you can be freed up to do what only you can do. Plus, you'll see the team and the results grow. If you are new to delegation, just pick 1 or 2 places to implement because this stuff does take time. And eventually you become more of a leader versus just a doer. Also, it might feel awkward at first. And if it does, the easiest thing is to just call it out. Just tell them, hey, I've been in this leadership training and coaching. I'm going to try a new approach here. And then start small and safe. Just do like a 2-week sprint test and try it out and see what happens. I actually dare you to try it out and see what happens. As a leader, I know this feels like there's not enough time to delegate, but I really promise you, this is the step that's going to free up time for you. It's ironic, but it works. So I want to challenge you now to actually give it a try. I mean, what do you have to lose? It's already not working well. You might as well try a new approach. And this is a simple thing that you can implement right away. So go through these steps, give it a try, see what happens. If you want help with this, then we have a few options in the link below. We have a mini course, we have one-on-one coaching, but give it a shot. Delegate the thinking and just see what happens.